I have entitled this reflection, A Time for Everything. It is based on our text in Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verses 1 to 13. Now, Ecclesiastes has been quoted as a book of cynicism and despair. All throughout, we hear the refrain, vanity or vanities. All is senseless, it says. Ecclesiastes is the Greek translation of Kohelet, meaning teacher, preacher, speaker. It is a derivative of the Hebrew word kahal, which means public assembly. Now, this suggests that his observations of life under the sun, quote unquote, are meant for the gathered people in the outer edges of the faith community. In other words, it is unapologetic. It is unapologetic on the meaninglessness of life for secular society because it is from a purely horizontal point of view, with God edited out of the picture. In Ecclesiastes, however, we are reassured that God is there and is in control over the times and seasons of our life. Those of us who are past retirement can rest in the fact that there is a call and a purpose for this time in our life. At the same time, we are told that we shall never really know why good and bad things happen to us. During this pandemic, for instance, we have been experiencing a season of grief, a massive loss of many things. The loss of loved ones, the loss of jobs, of income, the loss of freedom to move around and be with friends, the loss of community, and the solace of rituals that used to comfort us in our sorrows. Now, there are at least two responses given to us in this passage when we are faced with the perplexity of having an experience of both light and shadow in our lives. One is to discern the times and the seasons and to act accordingly. The other is to choose to be joyful, to rejoice, and to do good for as long as we live. I shall unpack these two responses. The first response is recognizing the hand of God in time. For everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven. Now often we are pressed and we feel there is no time to do the things that we love, the things that we enjoy. No, we are told there is time for everything, for every matter under heaven. In fact, there is a time to be born and a time to die. There is a time for the beginning and the end of life. There is no such thing as an untimely death when someone dies young or dies accidentally and suddenly. We say, it is an untimely death. No. As my mother used to say, kung oras na, oras na. No amount of money can buy us the medical intervention that is needed to stay the hand of death. Sa totoo lang, doctors cannot prolong life. They can only prolong the process of dying. Then we are also told that there is a time for tearing things down and a time to build. A time to plant, a time to pluck up what is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up. There is a time to sow and to be fruitful, to be productive. But there is also a time to get things uprooted, no matter how invested we are in what we have planned. There is a time to let things die. I myself have had to learn this. In other words, am I prepared to let an organization or whatever it is that I have invested my life in to die? Should I be prepared to walk away, to let things die, if it is time to die? And at the same time, allow ourselves to have space for grief, for our wounds to mend. And there is a time also to destroy, so we can build again. Uh, when we are thinking, for instance, of houses, sometimes it is better to just destroy the house so we can build again. And there is a time to weep and a time to laugh, time to mourn and a time to dance. In other words, there is a time for expressing our feelings. We mourn and we weep when occasion requires it. We do not bottle up our feelings or we distract ourselves with too much work, because anyway, we can only get distracted and not get healed. So we allow ourselves to mourn and to weep. And at the same time, there is a time to laugh, a time to dance when you feel like it. And do not get embarrassed when you are brimming and full of joy. And there is a time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones together. This is a little difficult to know with certainty. But I think one way of looking at it is to say that scattering stones metaphorically suggests aggression by ruining a field, throwing stones. And gathering stones is to prepare the land for cultivation. There's also a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. Now, sometimes in our relationships, there is a time for withholding our presence, for making a space so people grow on their own. This is true for families. This is also true for all relationships. Even in organizations, we make a space, a time to refrain from embracing. And there's a time to seek, and a time to lose, a time to keep, and a time to cast away, a time to tear, and a time to sow. There is a time to pursue our quests, to try and achieve what we want to do, but also a time for abandoning our goals, our ambitions. We have to learn how to lose. There is also a time to keep possessions, especially those which carry significant memories. I am at that time in life when I am trying to do what they call load shedding. I have moved to a condominium unit from my house, and I have a hard time thinking what I should cast away and what I should keep. But I think it is also true that there will come a time always for load shedding, so we can travel light. And there is a time to rip things apart and a time to mend them together. There's also a time for silence and a time to speak, a time to love, a time to hate, a time for war, and a time for peace. To keep our relationships, there is a time for keeping silent, but also there is a time to speak out. Words need timing to truly make a difference, to truly make their mark. And there are things to love and there are things to hate in people, in all relationships. So there is a time to love and a time to hate. And also, if it is a time for war, no amount of shuttle diplomacy, of peacekeeping, of negotiations can stay the hand of bloodshed. We know that in this endless war, for instance, in the Middle East, it is God who decrees the times and the seasons, the time for war and the time for peace. Now, what does this mean for all of us today? I think this has implications on what it means to live under the sovereignty of God in whatever season. It is interesting that after this series of what times and seasons can be like, there comes the question at the end. What gain has the worker from his toil? Or, as the Good News Bible puts it, what do we gain from all our work? All the busyness that God has given to us. I think what this means is that the times are not in our hands. It is God who decrees the times and the seasons, whether peace and prosperity or war and trouble. All we can do is to watch and discern the times, the so-called opportune time, or that kairos moment when the accent of eternity falls on human history. As Shakespeare puts it, there is a tide in the affairs of men, and we must rush and seize the flood tide. In other words, we must act accordingly. As Jesus said, let the fig tree teach you a lesson. When its branches become green and tender and it starts putting out its leaves, you know that summer is near. In the same way, when you see all these things, you will know that the time is near. These days, there are many people who say that the time is near. There are many signs that we are in the end times, in the last days. So I think it's important that we discern what is this time, what is this season. Now, the paradox of being human is that while we are creatures of time, we all long for things to last. You have this advertisement, built to last. No? We want things to last. We want the things and the people that we love to live forever. But then we know, walang forever, sabi nga nila. We are all subject to the second law of thermodynamics. We disintegrate and come to a necessary end. As an ancient woman once said, we shall all die. We are like water spilled upon the ground that cannot be gathered up again. But then we are told that God has put eternity into our minds and into our hearts, so that we long to know what comes next. We try to anticipate the future. Friedrich Nietzsche once said, when he was beholding this mystery about human beings, he said, man is an extreme piece of nature, an animal that makes promises, that answers for the future. Under the sun, he thinks that we are simply animals on the same level as the beasts, as Ecclesiastes also puts it. But there are limits to what we can know and control. Even if we were made for eternity, there are limits to what we can know and control. We were made in such a way that while we long for eternal significance, yet we cannot find out what God has done from beginning to the end. We are all just actors in a play where God is the author. We do not know if we are in Act 1, Act 3, or Act 5, the final end. It is only God who knows the beginning and the end. So, what is to be done? Ecclesiastes tells us that there is nothing better for us to do than to be joyful and to do good for as long as we live. Let us eat and drink, not as Epicureans would do it, but as creatures consciously grateful that the good things of creation are gifts from God. As the Jewish Talmud puts it, we shall be held accountable for the good things we beheld in life but did not enjoy. So, what are the implications of this? I would like to give you some things to think about. Nietzsche says that there are two different types of people in the world: those who want to know and those who want to believe. Now, this is wisdom under the sun. The fact is that those who just want to know and do not want to believe, like Nietzsche, end up with much vexation of the spirit, as Ecclesiastes puts it, or they commit suicide, like Nietzsche. But there are those people who, like Ecclesiastes, have learned humility in the face of mystery, knowing that there are things we cannot know, and we cannot know the meanings even of the events and seasons that come to us in our lives. And before this good and great God who holds the times and the seasons of our lives, we eventually learn to believe and find a way to live in joy and to keep on doing good for as long as we live. In other words, in the face of so much that disappoints us, face of that so much that makes us despair, we are told that there is nothing better for us than to enjoy our lives, to rejoice in the gifts that God gives to us, and to keep on doing good for as long as we live. So let us think together, and let me give you some questions that you can discuss together. First, what is this season in your life? What is God's call in it? Secondly, what perplexity disables you at this time? Sociologists talk about disabling perplexities. People as well as whole communities can be disabled because there are perplexities in their minds that they cannot solve. There is this jigsaw puzzle that you cannot put together, and it disables you. So, what perplexity disables you at this time of the pandemic? What are you being asked to believe? And thirdly, what things do you enjoy? And what good can you do alongside this at this time in your life? I must confess, at this time in my life, I just want to enjoy. And Sunday is a very good day for doing this. I always look forward to Sunday because on Sundays I do not have to think about work. I can watch Netflix for as long as I like because I like Netflix. In other words, what are the things that you enjoy? And what are the good things that you can do alongside this enjoyment? Fourthly, have there been times when you feel you are experiencing eternity? In other words, those moments when you have the feel of forever, when you want to, when you wish you can hang on to it. Huh? The feel of forever. Like Peter, you remember, before the transfiguration. And he wanted to keep it and said to Jesus, I would like to build, a tabernacle, a tent for this, Elijah and you and all. Now, this is human nature. We want to freeze those moments. But that's okay. We don't have to hang on to them because those of us who believe will have forever at the end of time. But now, when you see this and you experience this, the forever that is today, seize those moments and enjoy them because those are life sources. So, for you, it's important in whatever stage of life you are in, whether you're seniors, whether you're young people, or making your way in the world. It is important to, along the way, name those life sources. What are the things that will keep you going? What are the things that will give you hope? What are the things that you actually to enjoy today, which give you intimations that there is life, not just after death, but also this eternal presence that God has given to us even now. So name those life sources. The Lord bless you and keep you and give you joy in the name of Jesus. Amen.